Pappas is here. All their handlers are here.
So is every childless failed businessman in the district going to come here?
Yeah.
Is he just here to stalk rats?
Hey, how's it going? Sure. So Pappas is here, Hartman is here. Lisa Daly or whoever the.
I left the key.
Oh, that's okay. Never mind.
Sorry.
It's all right. Lisa Daly or Barton or whatever she wants to call herself is here. All their handlers. Do you think you could share this? It's on my profile. Could you share this? Oh, for some reason it flipped orientation. Like when I tried to share it. Yeah. Yeah. Well, apparently they're recording too, so. Usually they don't record these work sessions.
Well done.
Yes. We probably had a big old meeting about this before they came. So every single one of their handlers is here. I believe I saw Kurt Hartman. I saw Lisa Daly or Barton, whatever she wants to call herself. I saw the Fullens. And I'm not sure what Michael Neese looks like, but I'm sure he's here too. And, surprise, Pappas is here. I mean, what the heck?
Sure. Do it.
He's gonna be sorry he is.
Forget that.
Is that how the room is done? No. Yeah, my guess is, I don't know, it was set up this way so that they could see that TV with half the room open because they probably divide it, right? And then because so many people came, they opened it up. I don't know. Full house today.
My parents were married just
Kim says, "Hey, Jessica." Full house tonight.
Okay. Not sure. Yeah.
It is, Debbie. Yeah, all their handlers are here today. Usually I'm the only camera at these work sessions.
Call the meeting to order. Wednesday, April 6, 2022. Call to order.
Mr. Bibb,
Here.
Mrs. Jonas,
Here.
Mrs. Stewart,
Here.
Mrs. Hausfeld.
Here.
Dr. Rasmussen is absent this evening.
Dr. Rasmussen is absent because of a family emergency. She talked to Mrs. Hausfeld and myself today regarding that, so we wish her the best with that circumstance. She's unable to be with us this evening.
We can't hear back here.
It sounds like the sound system sounded off.
Pretty quiet. Microphones are just.
Well, it's a work session.
We'll do our best, you guys, okay? 1.3, the Pledge of Allegiance. Everybody stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. 1.4, safety briefing. We have two doors, one at the end of this room and another one at the end of this room. Motion to adopt the agenda.
I'll make a motion to adopt the agenda.
Second.
Mrs. Stewart.
Yes.
Mr. Bibb.
Yes.
Mrs. Jonas.
Yes.
Mrs. Hausfeld.
Yes. 3.0, Board of Education work session. The purpose of this meeting is as follows. Number 1, to discuss the district finances, and number 2, to discuss the learning environments. We will also adjourn into executive session.
Well, good evening, everyone. We're glad you could be with us this evening. As Mrs. Hausfeld said, this is a board work session, and the topics for discussion, learning environment, as well as finances of the school district. And the learning environment includes a lot of things from culture and some of the things that we've been doing, sort of an extension from the district's March 9th work session that the board had, so we have a continuation of that work moving forward. We'd like to open up tonight with a little bit of a update on where we are with our business operation update. So at this point in time, I'm going to introduce Mr. Eckert, and he's just going to give us a quick update of where we are with these projects that have been moving forward since January, and some even prior to that. So John, if you would please.
Thank you. Just as for the board, as you notice, we had put out an RFP out on the street for the sports medicine partnerships. The RFPs were due this week, this Monday. They came in, and what we are right now, my team is evaluating the RFPs to get all the data and make sure we're in good place. I will say just offhand, very pleased with the RFPs. As you know, we were aggressive with some of our ask in the RFPs, and the organizations have stepped up to those asks, and some great stuff there. So I hope to have an RFP opportunity for you to debrief at a future date. Okay. The projects that the board approved moving forward, just let you give you a quick update. We've been working with the contractors. Mr. Corley and the architects have had some meetings with contractors, progress meetings as we go through this. They're update meetings. We try to meet once a week and discuss. Nagel roof, all projects are on track, on time. Nagel roof, we're waiting for one supply chain piece with some fasteners and stuff, but Ace Exteriors is the winning contractor. He's not nervous at all at this point. He believes everything should be on schedule. The asphalt projects with the track and Turpin Mercer parking lot, we're on track. West Side has come out and done all their preliminary work they can do at this point prior to the asphalt plants opening up and really getting a solid time frame. But those are the projects that we've been working on. Just if no questions, back to you.
Continuation of the March 9th work session. We did want to give the board a little bit of an update about many of the things, or a few of the things that are taking place in the school district. When we met in March, there were some short-term goals that the Board of Education had. and they are related to tonight's agenda, so we want to do that. As far as building safety and security is concerned, we've been working with our 7 through 12 administrators to ensure that consistency exists in our infraction coding throughout our school districts, so that we have equal coding going into EMIS regarding infractions with our students, so that we can utilize that information to analyze what's taking place in our schools, to make decisions about that in the future. Consequence distribution, there was another meeting again today. There's been several follow-ups on that, where middle school principal, high school principals are talking about infractions that are taking place in the district. They're taking a look at their codes of conduct, and are we consistently applying the policies and the procedures of the school district with students who are making choices that would have them become part of that process. So we're doing that, and there may be some updated changes on that. Our elementaries and secondaries have started to take a look at common data that's come back to us from survey information. So we're looking at the common data to try to make, to come up with ideas about what we can do in certain places within our school district to help, and also taking a look at those codes of conduct. K through 12, we've been looking at access to facilities, volunteers who are coming into our building having been gone for a couple of years, basically with COVID. We've been looking at that. Some of that played out over the last couple of weeks. We'll share that with you in a few minutes. Trips, etc., things like that. We are also going to be reconvening our safety committee. We have an emergency management test this summer that we will be implementing. So we're back into the typical situation with schools, safety and security, and one of the big things is ensuring that district-wide that we are safe and secure. And you know, we engage our local fire departments, police departments, even the TSA in a lot of this planning. And so this summer is a big year for us because it is a full collaborative arrangement when it comes to emergency management, that emergency management test this summer. So that's it on building safety and security. Kim's going to talk a little bit about curriculum alignment. That was a significant issue that came to us from our Board of Education to kind of make sure that we're consistent there. So Kim, turn it over to you at this moment.
Good evening.
Can't hear you. Just saying.
These are meant for the
I know.
YouTube, not for necessarily amplifying me here. I apologize. I will do my best. When it comes to alignment, you know, a large part of what we've been doing has been meeting within our PLCs. As a district, we've had district-wide PLCs throughout the school year so that we can connect, make sure that we're using common practices, common strategies, but also common curriculum. Course of study with math, we completed our math course of study last year. However, there's a lot of work around that, so we're still looking at our assessments. We have spent time, I know Bob has spent, he was here this week, even with our math teachers, to really look at those common formative assessments that drive our instruction, help us identify gaps, help us to identify students who are doing really well and we need to push them further. And so that is work that will be ongoing for us, still aligned to the state standards. With ELA, we are still, I know Shane was meeting with secondary today. On Monday, Bob was meeting with our elementary folks. We have intentionally slowed our process down when it comes to the language arts course of study because we want to make sure that we're really taking a close look at our data, looking at where our gaps may or may not exist. What are the things that we're doing well? I know writing and phonics are two big components that we want to make sure that we're not just looking at resources, putting something on a shelf. We really want to look at what do our students need and taking the time to really vet materials that are appropriately aligned to our standards, also aligned to our philosophy and core beliefs. So we have intentionally slowed that down. We're still moving forward, and we have thus since the last couple of weeks sent something to our science teachers to start the conversation around where we're going with course of study for science. And so that this will then kick off in June their start to the course of study process. And remember, we try to do these big moments every 5 years with each content area, knowing that we're going to use PLCs to collaborate on an ongoing basis. We are continuing to do our learning walks. It's been a busy month, busy couple of months for us. What I'm really excited about is that rather than the teaching and learning team really facilitating a lot of that, Our buildings have been starting to own more of that, and now more teachers. By the end of this year, we should have BLTs in all of our buildings participating in those learning walks so that we can learn from each other. We're hoping to kind of engage with some of our work next year to do more collaborative coaching. So we're sharing strategies with each other. We're using common practice, not just in one school, but really trying to make sure that your grade level experience in one building will be the same as in another. And so we're going to continue to work on that alignment. I know Donna too, she had shared with us earlier in the year in a committee meeting that she's worked a lot with the experience-ships, again, kind of looking at what is that culminating experience we would like for every Forest Hills student to eventually have access to. That is a growing program. We're continuing to kind of work with our community partners to watch that build. We have also included a parent advisory group to help facilitate some of those opportunities and really help us identify, like, where do we want our students to move progressing forward. And then we also, Scott, you did your student advisory earlier this year, so also garnering some of that feedback from our students to help us move forward. So those are a lot of the things that are helping us with that alignment moving forward. And I know, Scott, you had mentioned common data. We have consistently looked at data over the last, well, forever since I can remember. Data's always been the thing that drives the decisions that we make. What I think we're seeing, especially, and we're going to talk about it here in a little bit, around behavior, we're starting to see some common things in a couple of different buildings, and we have a plan to address that. So we'll get to that when we get to that.
We've also had curriculum for those of you who are in the audience. Our curriculum committee, which includes board members, they have met, and so they continue to be involved in these processes, and so we're working together that way.
I want to
Like to introduce next, as to keep moving in this meeting. Yes, go ahead,
I just
please.
want to say too that when it comes to the curriculum piece, because I know there were questions that I wanted to, I don't know that I addressed it with all board members, but we do have specific policy around curriculum adoption that when we are looking at vetting resources, there is an opportunity for us to share that. It has to be on display for a month so people can come and review, and that there will be opportunity for families to even come if they want to review materials before the adoption. So there's always that time to have that involvement and connection. I'm done.
You had concerns about communication, or goals, I should say, about that. So we're going to have Josh Bazan, who is the coordinator for communications, give you an update on how those plans are working. So Josh, you're on, sir.
Sure. One of the big priorities when I came on a little over a month ago was the website. So to update you there, I think specifically in the last work session, the mental health resources list came up. That link lives on our website in several different places, and it's been updated with the most recent one in all locations. So that list that Kelly puts together with her team as of January 2022, that's the most recent version. That's on our site now in all of those locations. I'm also working with Kelly, I think she might mention this too, to develop the wellness section of the website. So we've got that sort of skeleton laid out and some of the content coming together, and we will pretty soon be able to work with the site provider to get that up and living on the site so that all of that can live in an easier section, an easier place to find for parents and for families. Other than that, the website, you're kind of updating page by page, so you might notice that some of the pages are freshening up. You know, it really is kind of page by page how we have to go through it. So the main photos for the district and the schools, those should all be cleaned out with current students who go to school, like at Mercer, as kids who are going to school there right now. So that is updated, and I'm working. We have a plan in place before the end of the year to at least shoot, and we should have the videos done by the end of the year. Each school also has its own video about each individual school. We have the gears moving on that to update those. The other thing I wanted to touch on was consistent information for the weekly newsletters and consistent information across the district as well. I'm working with some practices that were in place before I got here to make sure that that's happening at the different buildings for the different age levels. So we have some plans that have been in place that we're working on and tweaking. I'm also checking in regularly, at least once a week, with all of the building principals to make sure we're on the same page. Everyone's got information, oftentimes provided by me, that we can put into the newsletter so that families are getting the same information across the board.
Okay, we talked a little bit earlier, John did at the beginning of the meeting, about some updates, but it is important for folks to know that we do have a preventative maintenance plan. It is directly related to the finances of the school district. It's a long-term plan. And just a quick update on that, John, to remind people that what's happening there and what we're doing.
Within that, if you remember when we were digging through, we're trying to get everything updated up for, our goal is at least 10 years out to figure everything out. So we're working with vendors, trying to get realistic prices. They're not going to give us 10-year projected prices and things like that. But Ms. Crawford and I were meeting today also about this and updating some stuff that will definitely impact some financial decisions that we make later on in the year that will bring us up to date and give us good solid numbers of where we need to go in the next 3 to 4 years.
Board members are aware of this, but I wanted to thank John again. He's created the software that puts that in there over a long period of time. And so as you see things push in and pull out, and we need to prioritize depending upon resources, you can see how that changes over time. But the good news is there's a 10-year plan, and there are individualized significant things along the way, and it's able to be manipulated in real time to try to give the board specifics regarding finances when decisions are made. So that's good work. I appreciate that, John, and the board's leadership on that is also appreciated. So next is wellness, and there's been a lot of things going on in the area of wellness. So Kelly Brazo, want to welcome you here and give us the report, please.
Sure. You're right. We have an extensive list of things that we've accomplished in just even the month of March. The Pentagon Partners conversation we held in early March, and that was a conversation we invited with 5 professionals, non-educators, so that would include representative from Mercy Hospital, Dr. Fagans, Children's Hospital, Dr. Sorter, Jenny Mooney, our Assistant Health Department Director, Susan Graham from Child Focus, the Executive Director from Child Focus, and then Jennifer Wright-Berryman from the University of Cincinnati, who is a suicidologist, and just had an opportunity to talk with them about mental health, and in particular suicide, from a local, regional, and national perspective. We also held a superintendent student forum in early March, followed up with a parent presentation with Jennifer Wright-Berryman, our suicidologist from University of Cincinnati, and Chrissy Myers, our educational liaison from Child Focus. We last week just had Lauren Almond speak to our coaches to optimize mental success in sports, and that was in conjunction with Mike Glenn and the Anderson Mental Health Collaborative. We've established the district PBIS leadership team. We are preparing to have a wellness booth at the 5K and rolling out our slogan, Flourish in the Forest. I've spent a lot of time with Josh about the wellness page and really inviting our professional voice to that with our counselors, school psychologists, and so forth, making sure that that is comprehensive. It's also a work in progress and continually will need to be updated, so I appreciate Josh's partnership on that. And then last but not least is continuing to develop and train instructors for QPR in our district, and through John and support with our coaches, we have some interested individuals, in particular some of our athletic directors, who want to become instructors, and in partnership with Loveland Schools, we'll be having some instructors trained through Grantis Hope later in the spring. So that's a quick summation.
For those of you who are listening in, QPR, question, persuade, and respond, and refer. So that's a training that's happening globally throughout our entire district, and it is now extending into coaches and other individuals who will be working with our students after school hours, before school hours. And I believe that the goal is also to include parents as well in that as we continue to branch out. So that's really good. So these items here, short-term goals of the board, community needs to know that of the many things you hear and see on television or maybe in the newspaper, there's a significant body of work that this Board of Education is involved in, and they've been meeting, as I have said, in several meetings now, often with the administrative team, reviewing these materials, reviewing these plans, providing us with leadership and guidance in those areas. So I want to thank all of you for your work to keep these things moving forward as we have other significant things that are on our plate. So that's where we are with those things. And I know in a couple of seconds we're going to get into more about specific questions that board members have as we start to think about the future and moving forward in more detail with some of these items. Next is safe and secure learning environments. And so met with the Forest Hills Council this morning. It's all of our PTA, PTO representatives and several other individuals who are in the room who assist us. And so one of the questions is, how are we doing with Nagel? And that's important for us to discuss and give the board an update. And I think that Mr. Bibb and I were there this morning when we went through that meeting. There's some inflated numbers in our community right now about things that are happening at Nagel Middle School. I'm hearing social media, 70, 80 fights in the building, and those are not accurate numbers. And so we need to get back to reality here with the Nagel Middle School and what's taking place in there. So at Nagel Middle School, a document that I have reviewed, which is information that we provide to the Ohio Department of Education and our EMIS, which is Educational Management Information System. These numbers go to the Ohio Department of Education as a reflection of our district. So right now we have 41 students who are involved in some type of altercation or some type of situation where there has been a physical altercation. Well, that's 41 students, which means we're really talking about 20 fights in the building. And so people are hearing 40 fights, 70 fights. That's not what's happening at Nagel Middle School. One fight is too many, but we do not have an out-of-control building where kids are running the ship, so forth and so on. We have an increase of altercations in the building. We are seeing that countywide with the individuals that we work with Hamilton County, with Children's Hospital. We're learning more and more about the stress and the issues in kids' lives, and those stresses and issues are moving downward. In a middle school where you have 12, 13-year-old children, that's a place where some of that is more frequent than what you might find in an elementary school where we have sort of enclosed class, kids move in groups, they don't have the freedom that kids begin to have in the 7th and 8th grade. You move into a high school environment and it's a little bit different as kids mature, but in that time period, we know that there are more aggressive behaviors because kids are kind of figuring out who they are, how to socialize, how to get along. Again, no fight. No fight is a good situation. So about 20 fights in that building up to this point. There's another thing out there on social media about sweeping things under the carpet or not informing people about what's going on or maybe not providing consequences to students. Every single circumstance where there has been a confrontation in that building among students that the administration is aware of. That's important. That we are aware of. There's been some videos out there about things that have happened that we were not aware of. Same types of things happen in society. The police aren't there, the video's out there, and there's something going on over there. Of the ones that we have an awareness of, 100% of those students have received consequences. 100%. These are important numbers to leave the room with knowledge of. And of those 100%, I am personally aware of less than of one student who is a reoccurring situation in that building. So there's something else that I think we need to walk away with, and that's a positive attitude about the fact that after an altercation happens or after something takes place, when we work with our counselors, when we work with our students, when we work with our parents, we work with our affiliate organizations that are helping us with kids, we see that there are not reoccurrences that are taking place. So these are important things. We don't have 70 or 80 fights. We have more like 20. We have 41 students that are part of that. 100% of those 41 students have received consequences. And of those, we have one reoccurring, so we know that the interventions that we're putting into place after the fact are working. We are a learning environment. We are not a jail cell. And so that's important for us to remember that we are educating students after the fact. That's the whole reason that we have PBIS plans in our district. Behavioral Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 things that we're doing with students. Because that's part of the educational process for kids. And that's important for our community to be aware of. So that's the first part about that, which then led to the volunteer individuals. Every person in this room that is a school official or teacher is excited about having additional assistance in our buildings. We want those partnerships with our parents. We invite those partnerships with our parents. What has happened over the last 2 years is we haven't had as many people in the building because of COVID. Okay? So now we have this group of individuals, because of some of the things that they're hearing and some of the assumptions that they have, that want to come in and help us, and we welcome that. And what we've done is we've created a situation with the with the building's PTO, where we have people signing up. They have specific assignments. They have specific places in the building where they are assisting us, and this is a good thing. And it actually started this morning, the first actual volunteers being on site. And in the PTO this morning, Mr. Bibb and I heard that one of the volunteers who was there in the morning said it was a great situation. She came into the building. She received a document from the administration. She had an opportunity to be trained in the area that she was going to be going to. She had an opportunity to ask questions. She had an opportunity to interact with kids, and she said it was a wonderful day and a great experience. And that is precisely what we want. And so we've been able to make that happen. I do want to thank Mr. Bibb and the rest of the board members for pushing forward with that to get it done as quickly as we possibly can. We made that happen through the PTO because it was the most efficient way to do that. Individuals who were spearheading that in our community, I have talked to personally and invited them in to meet with us. They have been part of the design of this process. And I want to thank Jill, Ragacy, I hope I'm saying that correctly, her last name, but Jill is the PTO president at Nagel, and she has been more than helpful in putting that together and giving us direction as to how the PTO can really spearhead that and help move it along. So I have, the many things that are happening with our volunteers. What I forgot to say here was we've changed schedules, we've adjusted assignments, we've adjusted responsibilities in our hallways, near our restrooms. We've done all of those things. With our volunteers, moving forward, we think we have a positive situation. Again, no fight is a good situation. We need to recognize the age of the students, and we also need to recognize that at this point in time, our interventions are working, and we're thankful for those individuals who are coming in to help volunteer. So that leads us into another significant reason why we were here, which is the board discussion. And I want to really, if I may, Mrs. Stewart, you had some questions and concerns and some things that you wanted us to listen to this evening or consider this evening. So if you're okay with it, I'm going to turn it back over to you and let you guide us a little bit.
So obviously Nagel's been the hot topic of conversation the last couple weeks. And so I know people tend to get a little defensive when something negative happens. So I just want to state that I know there's a lot of great things going on in our schools and community, but when you see a place that maybe needs a little extra attention or maybe needs some improvement, I think sometimes you have to pivot and look into that a little bit more. So I think most people in the community can agree that there was obviously a problem going on here. I'm happy to see there's some stuff taking place to get things back on the right track. And I know Nagel has its own set of challenges with everyone coming together for 2 years and then separating out. And I'm really happy to see our community coming together to kind of make some stuff happen and get the ball rolling there. I also want to take a second to define bullying, because I think that sometimes this can be confused with like conflict. And so I want to state that bullying is intentional, it is purposeful, It has the intent to cause harm to a victim, and when a person feels threatened, intimidated, humiliated, or scared, that's bullying. And if the acts are repeated, it's bullying. So like I said, sometimes that's confused with conflict, and I think that conflict is an important part of growing up, but it's not bullying. And so conflict teaches kids how to give and take, how to come to an agreement, and how to solve problems. So I just wanted to clarify that there's a difference between the two. So I do think there needs to be consequences for behavior. And one of the comments you made is that there's a student that has reoccurring issues with this. So how long do we allow that to continue, or what kind of?
Well, our school district has progressive discipline. So each time you have a situation like that, then you move to a different level. I talked a little bit earlier about behavioral tiers of intervention. Excuse me. So let's take a student, not that student, let's just talk about a general
Right,
circumstance.
yes.
Where you have a student who maybe has a behavioral issue and there's intervention that takes place, there's some type of consequence, and we make a little plan and off we go. And then later, we let that plan go for a while, and then we see that there's a second infraction. So now we're gonna probably get a little bit more intense. We're gonna have a little bit tighter sort of adult presence around that student, and we start to think about different interventions that we might do, changing schedules, meeting with a counselor on a more regular basis, having a teacher be, kind of maybe helping that student by walking them to and from class, ensuring that students' schedules might even be changed to ensure that we're doing. So you're moving into like tier 2 type things. As we continue, if that behavior continues, now we begin to see that there's potentially a behavioral issue. And now you begin to work on legitimate behavior plans where you have specific individuals involved, potentially psychologists, more work with counselors, even maybe an outside agency or affiliate that's working with us, and certainly a lot of work going on with parents. And so then you get into potentially writing things down. Now, that's for a student who maybe has a behavioral issue. For a student who is defiant, for a student who does not have an identified behavioral issue, that's a whole different track that we go down. That becomes more aggressive with consequences. That was sort of the letter that went out from the superintendent that said, hey, we'd like for parents to take a look at our policies, we'd like for parents to take a closer look at our cell phone policies, because consequences right now, kids need to know that we're serious about this. So that's kind of the way that one goes. We haven't had, walk on some kind of wood here, any infractions for a few days. Again, it's a middle school, but those are the two different tracks that sort of happen when you're talking about reoccurring actions. One is behavioral plan, the other is defiance, and we're going to deal with that in a separate way. We are permitted to expel kids for periods of time. And if a student is on a behavioral plan, an IEP, individual education plan, suspensions and expulsions are dramatically different because you have to do what's called a manifestation, where you find out if their actions are related to their IEP or their disability. If they are, suspensions and expulsions are not permitted to go forward. You must come up with different plans. If it is not a manifestation, then you have more severe consequences that you can provide, just like a general education circumstance in your building. Did I get that right, Kelly?
You did a great job.
Okay, thank you.
So I guess some of the things I saw with like the letter that went out, I want to make sure we're addressing the problem and getting to the root of what's going on, because I think that, like you said, there's been an uptick in this type of behavioral stuff countywide. So maybe it's not just here, but I think it said at the last board meeting as well that this is something that has changed over the last few years. And so I think we kind of need to pivot and maybe look at other ways of dealing with this and helping the students, because they're obviously going through a lot of stuff. And so looking at ways of addressing the problem that we're seeing without necessarily punishing the entire student body population. So I think ultimately students need to learn strategies to help them avoid physical conflicts. And so some of the things that I thought might be nice would be, you kind of did establish and enforce like our current policies. October is National Bullying Prevention Month, and I don't know how anybody else feels up here, but I would love to see us maybe focusing on that at the beginning of the year. Maybe we have speakers in, maybe we do presentations, maybe we do, get-togethers and things within the schools to help build those relationships and that community feel in the school. I think that would be helpful. Formal training and programs that might help support the teachers, especially in the middle school, on dealing with how this shift in behavior has come about. I know Leslie's not here, but her and I had a little chat about maybe getting like a group, we called it Kindness and Connection, and do some community building and like focusing on socializing and relationships. I think some of that issue is that they haven't been doing things together for the last few years, and I think any type of picnics, skating parties, anything that helps them get together and have those social interactions in a positive way would also be helpful. So this issue hits very close to home for me, so it's something I'm pretty passionate about. So I just think we need to look outside the box at new ways to deal with what's going on, since this is an uptick, not just here, but countywide. So
So specific to us, I like your commentary about conflict is different than bullying. Interesting, last year we had some targeted activity taking place in the building, not necessarily physical, but again, middle school, and some real significant issues there that were hurtful to a lot of students, and that were, again, highlighting that in that age group, we've got to do more work. And we're seeing a little bit of that moving into elementaries. One of the things we're doing with our PBIS planning, we're trying to coordinate all of that so we can incorporate some of the things you're talking about with a reward system as we think about the upcoming school year. The continuous improvement plans in our building should be including things like you're talking about now, where we're finding new ways to incorporate assistance with our plans. So I like that thought. We have hearts and minds that we do every year. That's for our teachers, the stress level for teachers and the things that they can do, and some things we can teach them about themselves and about how to educate in the classroom. That's something else that we're doing. We talked today, and we've been talking, it sounds like we did a lot today. Well, that's because today we had a leadership meeting, a district cabinet meeting. So fresh in our mind, and certainly preparing for this evening. But in our transitions from our elementaries into our middle school, we've talked about that and what that looks like in the summer and what types of materials. We have summer reading for students, summer opportunities for kids. Can we provide to parents in the month of July preparing for August? Here's some things about middle school. Here's some things about all of the topics that you brought up this evening. Here's some resources for you. Here's how to talk to your children. Here's how to prepare them for middle school, going from a very controlled 6th grade into a very more free, more opportunistic social place in the middle school. How should you talk to your children about that? Here are some things that you can do. We're also doing that with our teachers. So the transitions into the school are important. The detailed plans of how we are including others, as well as providing rewards and incentives for our kids, what we're doing with our teachers with hearts and minds to ensure that they are feeling good about their environment and good about confident, and those trainings that we've been talking about are important. There is no, it's not surprise, but we all know that 6 individual buildings that are very nurturing and again, today we have 2 more that went into the Hall of Fame in the state of Ohio, so we have 6 Hall of Fame schools. Congratulations, Sherwood and Summit, for earning those. We just found that out. We have good things going on in our elementaries, and then we have all of these individual sort of things happening coming into one middle school. So we need to be talking about the consistency in the last few weeks of the sixth, maybe the last half of the year in the sixth grade, about preparing kids for this next move, providing parents with information, providing students with skill sets, making sure that our teachers have the skill sets as well to be able to navigate through that. Last year it was a spike in bullying. We saw that play out. We're not proud of that, and that was very difficult for us. This year we're seeing some physical things playing out. And we gotta work with parents and teachers and kids to try to minimize some of that as we move into 6 buildings going into 1. And quite honestly, you can go, we can't continue to blame everything on COVID. We have a responsibility to get this right. And so we're being mindful of that. Yeah, I'm sorry, Kim.
No, to your point around our continuous improvement plans, just to kind of give you an idea of where we are in our schools right now, is April is always that time of the year where we really are digging into where have we been, where are we going. This is where I know Kelly with our directors, Shane and Bob, are going to spend some time really going through. This is where we start to review our code of conduct, look at trends, look and see if there are revisions. Again, that will be something that is presented to the board for feedback. But this is the time too for us. We have a wellness plan, and it's encompassing around academics, physical wellness, emotional wellness, mental wellness, and how that impacts student achievement. And so it's a pretty large thing. And that includes our positive behavior supports. And what I'm hearing, I hear the word intervention a lot, but what we're really looking at is the prevention piece. And because we do have data and some of the trends we talked about in other meetings where we know that in 4th grade, 6th grade, those right now, and we met with our elementary principals today, and it was kind of like, here's some hot spots. If we know those are hot spots right now, what are we going to do today? But then also as we transition into the middle school. So those are conversations that are happening. We're looking at the consequences, but we're also looking at how do we then build those relationships so it's not so punitive. It needs to be community, right? Like we need to go back to what that is and how do we establish some of those relationships and expectations so we can move away from some of that punitive work and really look at what are we doing to support the portrait of a learner that I know that we've talked about. So there is a lot of that transition planning happening, prevention, and then I know too, the calibration for our folks that's are working through the summer, our principals, that's where Kelly has already worked with Shane today to establish some dates of when are we going to sit down and really kind of look at different scenarios and calibrate and what your definition of bullying better aligned to what this person's definition is, and that we do have an understanding of which and how do we respond appropriately. So those things, I think that we do those things annually, but there's always room for refinement, and that's really where we are is trying to wrap this year up while looking to the future ahead. And I know Rob is also working with where we're going as far as how we support with staffing and some adjustments we want to make to support Nagel. So I don't know if you want to address any of that or not, but
upcoming.
Yeah.
Here he's going to be.
One of the things that we have talked about and the board is aware of is not YouTube. Scary. So just kind of considering ways to provide some additional staff at Nagel in specific positions, not additions to the organization, but just kind of reallocations and trying to be efficient with the staffing model that we have and kind of addressing some of the concerns around supervisory issues and that kind of thing. So things like a full-time athletic director who's going to be able to be helping impact a large portion of the building while providing supervision during the school day in the cafeteria and the hallways with the administrative team. We have discussed and we have posted what is currently listed as an anticipated Dean of Students position. And we've talked about just, again, trying to add some additional eyes and ears in areas of large congestion, cafeteria, hallways, that kind of thing. And then also just assisting with some lower level disciplinary kinds of things, attendance related and that sort of thing. So really assisting in some of the office work and that kind of thing. So just some ways that we're looking to try to, within our means, kind of make do with what we have in a way that makes the most sense based on the situation at hand.
I have a couple more questions that kind of go with this. You were talking about different consequences and ways of dealing with stuff, and I am wondering if, when that stuff is thought out, is it one of those situations where like consequences like fit the crime type thing? Like if you make a mess in the lunchroom, like with your food tray. I'm just making something up.
Those are 10-day suspension. You get them out
Do
immediately.
you then stay and, maybe you clean the lunchroom, or maybe you come in, for Saturday school and you help clean an area, or, do you do lunch detention? Like, what kind of things are we, and maybe that's maybe too
Your question
specific.
has the answer, actually. I think, it's the first week of school, and kids haven't seen each other. And so they throw a French fry. And so your teacher or whomever swoops in and says, come on now. Now, tomorrow, if this continues, the teacher's going to probably be much closer to that table, monitoring, and then we're going to start thinking about what you're saying. We're going to start having, you're not going to sit together, or if you do sit here, if I see that again, then we're going to probably be going to see Mrs. Eshelman or Mr. Fender or whomever. And so you provide consequences. And yes, kids are asked to stay behind. They're asked to help clean the table. They're asked to respect the individuals who do that work on behalf of them to ensure that they have a good, successful day. So again, it's a learning thing. It's respect. It's understanding that you are not the only person in the world, that there are other people that are making your day successful. And so it's back to that question you had before. As time goes along, if kids are not responding, then we're engaging parents, we're engaging other individuals to try to help us at home. We don't want to swoop in on the first day and just provide, the nth degree of discipline, because we know that for many students, these are learning opportunities, and if we don't teach and help guide them and give them a push towards a better way, then they may do it again. And we don't want to have confrontation with students and staff. We don't want to have confrontations with students and students. So it's progressive. Then if it just continues, we get into that code of conduct and it has to look a different way. And so that's how that works.
What I would say too is very similar to our curriculum when we spend time looking at the alignment of our beliefs and how we respond to our policy as written. It's very similar with wellness and the plan that we're working through. In terms of, we know in conversations with our elementary schools, zones of regulation, for instance, keeps coming up, where it's really identifying, like, where am I as far as like how I'm feeling about my emotions or whatever situation, and what is the thing that's making me feel that way, and what are the steps that I need to take to come down to a more neutral position. And so our elementaries have been doing that, and I think they've been doing it in pockets. This is now the first time where I've sat down, and Kelly, I don't know if you want to elaborate, but it's more of an opportunity now where we're all saying the same thing, using the same kinds of expectations. That alignment is coming, but it now has to go up to the middle school. And that's where I think, sometimes want to reinvent the wheel, where we have some really great systems in place. And so that need for that alignment, that need for us to calibrate, and that need for us to just kind of really focus on the Forest Hills experience will help us.
Katie, I just want to add that your question about the cafeteria situation is really a great example about PBIS, positive behavior intervention supports. Kind of like what Scott and Kim were saying, it's, the first time that happens, it's a teachable moment, and we want to have our students, every building has their own theme: be kind, be respectful, but basically it boils down to pride in yourself, pride in your environment, pride in your school. And so, that's an excellent example of how that is not, we don't want students throwing French fries, right? But why? Because we can choose to do different things to get someone's attention, and we need to, have confidence in ourselves and those kinds of things. So Kim mentioned, that calibration of, for example, zones of regulation. the 6 buildings feed into Nagel. We have 2 years with them at Nagel. And so like that 7th grade year in my mind is kind of like calibrating them to this new language, this new speak, if you will, where really it should be common so we can just keep going, right? Just bring us all together and keep going. So it was a great example of PBIS, and I just wanted to say thank you for that. It was a good question.
Do we do anything with that, like the different houses and teams in Nagel? Do they do anything like where they work together and build camaraderie amongst each other?
So even within, we have our district wellness plan. Each building has their wellness plan, and they do have a plan that reflects the different needs of each of the houses and teams. And the intent of the teams, and I'm glad you mentioned it, is to create that school within a school. Like if I had any wish for any parent, is to never watch those Diary of a Wimpy Kid movies or anything like, because that is really not what it looks like inside. The intent though is because the building is massive, is that we have to create that school within a school. So all of our teams are in one space in a hallway, and that there are within proximity, that helps, but also they do set goals and they do have reward days, and they do have opportunities that if we all kind of focus on this goal together, what is our incentive? And so they do have those things. I think one of the things that we need to look at is even that student voice piece that I think even that parent voice, that maybe our ability to really kind of connect on a larger level to like, how do we build that up, I think is always a goal for us. And so something that we can take a look at even more closely.
The teams at Nagel, are these kids go to Turpin and these kids go to Anderson? Would it be beneficial if they hung out more with kids that they would have relationships with longer term? If you're in a place for 2 years and the friends you're making, you're not going to be in the same class with after 2 years. There's some investment.
We've talked about, I know I've had conversations with Stacy Gillard from the foundation, and how can we have those moments too where it's like we came from our elementary that we love and now we're in the 7th grade and we're not seeing our friends. Like, are there opportunities in 7th grade, 8th grade, even in 10th grade where maybe I haven't seen people that I've connected with? Like, do we need to do more community-based? There's lots of ideas that are floating out there that we need to think about. I think what's tricky with scheduling in the middle school is that because of space, because of the number of teachers, like we can't say Anderson Turpin or what, like we have to base it on where are we with our students and what their needs are as far as like what is the best curriculum we can offer all of the individual
I just feel like you're more invested in making those friendships if you're going to continue to see them after 2 years.
So I could be wrong, but I am unaware of any other school system in the state of Ohio that has 6 elementaries coming into a middle school and then fanning back out into 2 high schools. So typically in circumstances like this, the questions you're having, we're reaching out to colleagues. We're looking at other arrangements. We're going and visiting. We're seeing how other teams are housed. We're seeing what they do, because there is benefit in having other practitioners give you their story. We don't have that. And so we are kind of flying the plane while we're building and making adjustments along the way. So the questions you bring up, if we look like, ooh, we don't know the answer to that, some of those research projects are more difficult to do because we don't have as many opportunities to look at other organizations that have a similar, like Atlanta and I have 22 schools that we can go to that are made up like us, and we can look at all sorts of financial things. We can look at all sorts of student data, discipline, whatever it might be. In this scenario,
Right.
we are the one district that I'm aware of that has that big of a thing going
one
on.
room.
Yeah, right.
I think Katie, to your point, I struggle a little bit too when I think about the portrait of a learner and knowing that a lot of our kids, they are going to leave us. A lot will come back, but many will leave, and I want them to be competitors with all sorts of different people from different walks of life, and that, when you look at our local successful companies, like They have people who are not necessarily from here that I want our kids, yes, connected. And it's difficult. We have a problem when we have 2 years to get it right in the middle school, but then how do we also give them the skills that when they are having to make new friends and find new situations, how do we arm them with those skills for making sense? It's a fine balance.
Is the same kids in the 7th grade with you in the 8th grade, or does that change as well?
That may change.
Because it's almost like you're moving. You're moving in 7th grade, 8th grade, and 9th grade, and that's got to be hard during those years where, I mean, it's hard being a kid. So could we attempt to try it one year, Anderson and Turpin, just to see how it goes, or if bullying and all of that?
I know I did a breakdown for Bob at one point because the numbers just don't, I mean, I don't know that it's physically possible because we have more, I think it was Anderson, than I could pull it up, but there's not a clean split that you're going to have classes that are oversized for Anderson
Staffing
kids.
would become an issue.
Get a whole
But even
section of
space.
teachers, the way we broke down. Because there's too many, you can hit, I think it was like 2 for Turpin, 2 for Anderson, and there was one group for, I think it was just Anderson. Or was it, it was Anderson or Turpin. So you'd hit to hire, just for those class sizes, you'd have to hire enough teachers to cover those classes.
It's not lost on me though that there needs to be more to support a transition, period. Like
I have one other kind of idea or thought process. There's no recess at Nagel, and I know that probably sounds like silly, but there is no outlet. These kids have gone through 6th grade having like a break in the day, like an outlet. You get to play with your friends, you get to do something. And I know like when they get older, it's like, you know, you play kickball, maybe you play football, maybe you just, you know, girls walk around and chit chat with each other. But I don't know if there's enough time in the day to add 10 or 15 minutes where they are again in a situation where you can kind of unwind a little bit, have, again, it all goes back to making these connections and building these relationships, because I truly believe when you have that, you're less likely to be in fist fights and have aggressive behavior. And, you know, some of this bullying stuff, once, you know, if you get to know people, you get a better understanding of them. So I'm just looking at other ways for them to socialize, build a stronger community, and, you know, recess is an outlet where maybe you get some of that energy out that you have, you know, building all day. The kids in element or middle school still need to move.
purposeful movement, yeah.
Well, there's that SOAR time, isn't there, where they have a study hall?
We have SOAR time and there's advisory as well. And I mean, I think that lends itself to a conversation around is that how can we repurpose that time or look at that time more purposeful movement. I know as an adult, when I sit in meetings all day, at some point, get me up and moving and I'll be much more engaged. So that's true of our students too. I do think our teachers within the classroom attempt to provide purposeful movement, but I hear you. Like we all in a day need a break. I will say that Turpin and their building leadership team has spent a lot of time over the last year, and they've had conversations with Kyle at Anderson to really look at like what does the average school day look like when I start my day and I like go from class to class to class. What does it look like? How does it feel? So that we know, you know, what the kids' experience is, so that we can make some better adjustments, because we know as adult learners how we need that. So I think that's certainly, and I know in a conversation that Shane had today with all of our secondary leaders, really looking at our philosophies moving forward. How does that impact our classrooms at large and even scheduling? So I'm making notes.
Great questions.
I have a question about kind of when you were talking about, Kim, the continuous improvement plans, and Scott, with your kind of bringing parents and teachers involved from 6th grade into middle school and 7th, 8th and such. I think we all know how combative social media can be, with a huge problem with that. And I think we've talked about it before on how we try to have, you know, some of the kids with their TikTok challenges and, you know, all that kind of stuff. How are there any type of discussions or plans that you guys are thinking about putting in place to kind of combat social media?
So at Turpin and Anderson, they have, like, for example, at Turpin, they have wellness expectations that includes a social media opportunity to learn about how it can be positive and how it can be a negative impact. And then at Anderson, it's the same kind of concept. It's being a better digital citizen. And so most of those lessons are provided in advisory times at the high schools, for example.
So we don't do anything at Nagel yet, or?
I'm sure we do. I just don't have that with me, but I can let you know what it is.
Okay.
They do a lot of, I know the advisory has spent a lot on those types of PBIS lessons. So, but I can get exactly what it is at Nagel.
Other questions on this topic? Concerns, recommendations? Comfortable with where we're moving with some of the educational components for parents and some of the things we're doing staffing-wise and some of the other things we're trying to do with structure, PBIS, additional folks in the building, more connections, more relationship development. And it's not only in fighting, but it's in the culture, harassment, bullying, and those types of things like that. It's a culture that we're trying to create. So transitions from 6th grade on into the 7th grade and some of the things we can do there to prevent, as Kim said, and provide parents with resources, as well as our staff. So.
This is a curious question. Why does Nagel, the high schools have Saturday school? Why does Nagel have Thursday? Why is that not Saturday too?
I think it could be a natural thing for parents because
Parents?
because of the parent having to legitimately drive every kid where on a Saturday a sophomore can plop themselves in the car and drive themselves over. So we don't want to punish parents on their day off, just on their Thursday night. But, well, I mean, if there's a switch that needs to take place.
So you're not, would drive home the expectation to the parents, to have a talk with your kids.
Everybody's
How you've
inconvenienced.
inconvenienced me.
Yes.
I do think that some of it too is staffing and being able to have people available for, because a lot of our folks are also coaches and do a lot of other things after school. So having a consistent person has been a little more challenging this year.
I think sometimes too, I just suspect this, but maybe there's a sense of security in parents of a middle schooler that has a Thursday after school opportunity versus a Saturday school with older students that might be present. You know, maybe there's a little bit of uneasiness with that, 18-year-old senior with a 7th grader.
I would think they would be at Nagel with their own peers. But hopefully there's not more than one in there.
Yeah, but I just mean if it was a staffing issue and we had to blend it together. I was just thinking about that.
We'll check into that one. You need a better answer than the one you just got. You deserve a better answer. Stumped. Well, we didn't stumped on that one, but we'll check into that. We all have we're surmising here when you need a better answer for that. Am I hearing though that it would be, can't vote, but I'm reading tea leaves that Saturday might be an option that we would have for all the reasons that have been discussed, and we don't need to say any more than that. I'm just listening and taking things in.
I remember when my daughter had her phone taken away for the 3rd time when she was at Nagel. They called me on a Friday, and her mom's on a bus. She can't come. I said, well, I'm all the way in Westchester. So her phone stayed there for the weekend, and that was the last time she ever had her phone out because nobody can get to it. So
See, a consequence that fits and it's
consistency.
What's that?
Some of those parent conversations are very interesting about the $600 cell phone that you're holding over the weekend. That's property and so forth and so on. So that's, again, part of the discussion. Our next slide is about guest speakers, and it's about the learning environment, and it's about the Racial Diversity Awareness Day 2022 that came up. So a lot of speculation out there as to what took place. Well, earlier this year, Kim was working with principals. We're going to blame this one on COVID to some extent because we haven't had people in the buildings. So we've had discussions with our principals for quite some time, not just this past week and not today. We've been having conversations about new forms and new ways to invite visitors, guests, volunteers into our buildings. We've had a couple of snags this year that I don't want to necessarily go into now, where we had, this is how we've always done it, and what we found out is that that didn't work out so well because we weren't informing people appropriately of what was taking place in class. One of the good qualities, I say that respectfully, this Board of Education has made it well known that if we're going to have guest speakers, if we're going to have information that is associated with the classroom that happens outside of the classroom and oftentimes inside the classroom, we want parents to be made aware of that. Well, with a couple of hiccups this year and knowing that we had another day where a massive amount of kids, when I say massive, I don't want to overdo it, we had about 150 kids, I think, Dave, something like that, that were signed up for this event. And what we found out along the way, late in the process, was that not all of the information was provided to parents. So rather than have the opposite of what we received, which was a lot of concern about why you canceled it, we would have had a lot of concern about why did you move forward with this without informing us. So we made some decisions internally to postpone based on our practice, which is guided by our board to make sure that parents are aware of what's taking place. Those are good things. Once we found out that that wasn't necessarily taking place, we decided to postpone the event. It includes not only guest speakers, but it includes materials. And so this is what took place on that day. The goal was to immediately come up with a way to reschedule. So I'd like to go to the potential dates that we have up here. We are talking with Mr. Spencer, who is working with not only the original staff member who was helping us create create the schedule for this day and the materials, but we have some other individuals who will be assisting with that process. So these are dates that we're looking at to potentially have that, so everyone knows that we did not cancel. There was no political motivation. There was nothing like that. It was about making sure that we were holding true to what the expectation of our Board of Education is, which is to inform parents of things that are taking place that are in addition to, that are aligned with the curriculum. So those are the dates. And honestly, there's really not a whole lot more for me to discuss on this topic other than everyone should know that it is something that is planned to have rescheduled. We certainly in these conversations talk about balance in the materials that are presented to students, so we have an equal balance of what's going on. And in this case, we are including a couple of other voices in that to ensure that we are assessing what we're doing and not for the goal of taking something away or adding a significant thing to the day, but making sure that we have balance in that day. Those are the dates that we're working towards, and I'm hopeful that we can get that accomplished pretty soon and inform our parents of what's taking place there. After that, another big reason why any board expectations on that? I missed that bottom bullet there.
I mean, about this day, I mean, I would be in support of a true cultural diversity day where we bring in, you know, different ethnic cultures and maybe do like music and food and dancing. Just, I think with this racial diversity awareness day, I don't think it's a true diversity day. I don't think it's, talking to some of my Black friends in the community, they were offended by this because it's not representative of every experience. And I'm not really sure why we're focusing on the Black and white. And at a time where we're so divided, we really need to come together. So a celebration of cultures, I think, would be a better route than, you know, some of the information that is in that 10-page packet. I mean, I could read some of the questions, but I'm sure everybody has read them before. And yeah, I mean, I support the true history, good, bad, and the ugly. We should teach it, but I believe all of that information is really one-sided. And to make this point too, there's 70 to 80% of our 11th and 12th grade population that wasn't even getting instruction that day. So.
That were in assessments, state assessments?
Well, no, at Turpin, the 11th and 12th graders who were not participating in this were not given any instruction.
Dave, is that accurate?
All students were not participating in this, were in regular classes, going through the normal schedule.
They were?
So yes.
Okay, that's not what you had told me when we spoke.
The ones that chose to participate were one that met with their teachers ahead of time, or with conversations with their teachers, and knew at any time if the teacher said you need to be here for this, they would miss that period to do what they need to do, if it was an assessment or something that the teacher felt was critical.
That's not the information I had heard originally, so thank you for clearing that up.
Okay, next on our items are finance. Probably significant reason why the room is filled. So, 5-year forecast is something that we'd like to go over. We've done this many times, so this will be most likely brief, but then we have some scenarios that we want to go through, and then we'll get into some considerations and then move into, at the board's discretion, an executive session. So, we're on. Elena.
Yeah, Jody, if we could start with the November forecast. And all these slides that you're going to see today, you actually have seen before, and I just thought it would be good to go over them one more time. Hopefully the scenario summaries, we've been talking about finance a lot. We've had a couple of board retreats or work sessions, and we've also had a finance committee meeting where we've discussed the issue that we have in our forecast here. So as you can see here, our current forecast shows that based upon current trends, the district should take action in our upcoming school year, so in school year 22-23, in order to avoid a cash balance that would violate our cash balance policy in school year 23-24. As you know, our cash balance policy says we will have on hand cash that is equal to 10% of total revenues. So in our school year 23-24, at the end of that, we're under $2 million in our cash balance. So we need to take steps to avoid that. And of course, the only way to make changes into our forecast, 2 ways. We either increase revenues or decrease expenditures, or some combination of the 2. So if you could go to the next slide, Jody. 2022. So we've talked about a lot of scenarios, like I said, over our past meetings. So what I've done is I've attempted to summarize them and put them all in one spot. So we have 2 years coming up that we could pass a levy in. Levies passed in 1 calendar year are collected in the following January. So I have 2 different summaries. I have one summary sheet for scenarios of financing options that we could follow if the levy were passed in November of 2022, and then the next sheet will show the scenarios that what would happen if the levy was passed in 2023. So the way they're set up here is, you see in the first column, we have the millage. If you look at the second column, we have the reductions that are assumed in this particular scenario. And going out over the cash balance, you see that given those 2 assumptions with the levy passed in November of 2022, that would be the cash balance going forward. I've highlighted year 2025 so that you can see where we're at in the 3rd year of a levy, because here we are currently on a 3 levy cycle. So given those various scenarios, you can see whether or not in year 2025 do we violate our own cash policy. And what you're going to see a little bit further in the presentation here is that the first scenario, 4.7 mil levy with $250,000 in cuts,
When it gets to 2025, we'll violate our cash balance policy. At that point, the general fund will be around 97 million in terms of total revenues, which means our cash balance would say at June 30 of 2025, we should have a $9.7 million balance. So you're going to see a little bit, that particular, not by much, it just violates it by a little, so we left it on there. But as you can see where we would stand given the various levy scenarios going forward. So that's the scenarios that we pulled together for 2022. And Jody, if you could go to the next.
Can we go back just for a second?
Oh, sure.
How much are you budgeting for inflation on that, or projecting?
What we have in for inflation is about 2%. So it is a little bit light given current inflationary dollars. Did you have something? Okay. Moving on to 2023, you see the same scenarios, but the difference between the one you just looked at and this one is that the levy would be passed at some point in calendar year 2023. So again, it doesn't matter if it were to be passed in May, August, or November, you still do not get the money until January of 2024. So again, the same sorts of scenarios going out through there. And again, 3 years out from a levy passed in 2023 would be in 2026. So going down through there, Jody, if you could scroll down through there, you're going to see that it takes a much higher levy to achieve the cash balance to meet our policies if you miss 1 year of those levy collections. And again, this is organized in the same way. Both spreadsheets are sorted by cash balance, smallest to largest in terms of cash balance. When we look at these things, another question that we need to wrestle with when the board goes to set a levy is what's to be included in that levy. So if you could go back, sorry, to the 2022 analysis. Again, we have the same set of data for 2022, and we asked the question, what do we want this levy to cover? So again, what do we want this levy to cover? If we address general fund needs only, and we continue with our current trends, given that levy millage, given those amounts of cuts achieved in our general fund, we achieve these balances going through, and these levies will only address our general fund needs. To move on down, if you could scroll down to the next group. The next thing, the next group there, when you see the 5.5 mil levies with cuts ranging from 1 million to 1.5 million, what we've included in there, we've increased our expenditures to be able to cover our preventive maintenance plan, so that we know we have a lot of needs in the district, some that are being put off. And you heard Mr. Eckert say that earlier in the day. He and I sat down and took a look and shored up some numbers on, were we able to meet all those needs in the years that our preventative maintenance plan has them scheduled? This is the type of assumptions that we would need to make that happen. Going one step further, should we decide, well, if we're going out for a levy, we know we have a significant issue in the pool. That's something that we're wrestling with. It is about, as John's presented in the past, it's about 2.5 million to be able to get an option that will correct that. So if we were to include correcting the pool issue or taking care of the Anderson Township pool. Again, it's going to take a little bit more money. I spread the cost of that $2.5 million over 3 years. John and I talked. We could cash flow, move some projects around to make that happen. But that is the very millage amount with the cuts necessary to be able to achieve funding all those things. And I know I'm going over this kind of fast, but you have it in the PowerPoint. You can click on it. And if you have any questions, please just kind of ask at the time.
Rob Fellows, kind of a historian. He likes to look at history. Rob, what is the percentage or examples of passage of levies in our school district over, say, the last 30 years or so regarding some of the millage levels?
So since 1967, we've had 20 operating levies, and according to the research I was able to find. And, I think the board should know that, generally speaking, a good chunk of them are between 4 and 5 mils. 36.5% of those operating levies over 5 mils since 1967 have been successful. And 63.6% of operating levies under 5 mils have been successful. Quite a difference there. And then just some interesting, just in terms of voter turnout, the district has a 100% passage rate for operating levies when 15,000 voters turn out, and that's happened 5 times in the last 60 years or so, compared to a 35% passage rate for operating levies when less than 15,000 voters.
And I think it's always important to balance the needs of the district with what your community is willing to support. And that's some good data that you do have to look at. There are a lot of things that influence the levy vote. As Rob just showed, high voter turnout, what the ask really is, the economy, whether people are doing well and have the money to give certainly is one of those factors. And there's so many things that just ultimately go into picking the levy. It's not just based upon needs. There's a lot more things, and that's certainly something that's important to remember.
It's about 50-50 on back-to-back operating levies too.
So every scenario that's been provided for the Board of Education to review includes reductions. Reductions added to those that have been made over the last few years in our school district. And the postponement from November of 22 to November of 23, as Alana, as not Alana, but as the numbers that Alana presented show, increases millage and increases reductions to make that happen. And those are the types of things that boards of education wrestle with. We talked tonight about all of those things that we're trying to accomplish and all of the bases that we're trying to cover. Developing cultures and ensuring we have safety and security, and the PMI or the PMP projects, and all of those things that we have moving forward. And so to accomplish those things with the funding model in the state of Ohio that has no inflationary component, as you talked about, Mr. Bibb, there's a unfortunate forcing of a local community to respond to that. And we try as hard as we can, this board has and others that I've worked with, to minimize the millage, to maximize the efficiency, and to spread that as far as we possibly can. And I think if we go with an attempt at a 6 or 7 year time period without a levy, these numbers are going to become some like we've seen in area school districts in the teens, and that we do not want to present to any Board of Education. So November of 22, as we go back to that slide, Jody, the original slide, and I'm not making a recommendation here, I'm just saying that this is the reality of something in the original slide, Jody, thank you. One more, please. The actual PowerPoint, yeah. Thank you. So you see the considerations down there, and they've kind of been discussed a little bit here. Timelines are important. So a 100-day deadline, there's a requirement by Friday of July 29th of this year, if there was going to be a resolution of necessity, which goes to the county auditor. And that's where they take any millage that a Board of Education presents to them through their treasurer or chief financial officer to make sure that the millage calculation is correct. So there's a certification that needs to happen there. Second part of the timeline, so to speak, is Wednesday, August 10th. And that is where the Board of Education in this community and any other would need to have a resolution to proceed. And that goes to the Board of Elections. So if there was going to be something on the ballot in November of '22, we have a 100-day deadline of Friday, July 29th for resolution of necessity to the county auditor. And we have Wednesday, August 10th as a resolution to proceed. That needs to go to the Board of Elections. And those things don't just show up. There's a lot of work that Mrs. Cropper is doing in preparation of all that. The next part of that is levy finances. Again, no recommendations here, but the reality of levies is that you need an army of people to assist you with that and the finances of that. And so what I know from talking with Jason Hubner, who has been the treasurer of the committee for Forest Hill Schools, the support committee for Forest Hill Schools, there is $8,006 right now in the treasure chest. It takes about $30,000 for a committee to put that on, so they've got a pretty good start. When we did it 3 years ago, there was less money than that, significantly less, but now there's a little bit of a balance in there of about $8,000 if that was something that they were going to do. Obviously, there's fundraising related to that. But then you have the levy committee, the chair, the volunteers, all of the individuals who do all of the work, because as you know, the treasurer and the superintendent and the staff is not allowed to put a levy on. We provide resources like information that they may have so that they can prepare their brochures and all the things that are related to a levy. And then there's the staffing. And so of all of the scenarios we've talked about, what we don't talk about in an open session is those scenarios and how that impacts the people in our organization individually. And so the scenarios that had numbers of reductions associated with staffing in our school district is something that is, again, directly related to employees, which is an executive session discussion. And Mr. Bibb, absent of other conversation at this point, or questions or that you may have, is hopefully going to make a recommendation to move us into executive session so that we can talk about the specifics of some of these scenarios with our organizational and the staff within it. Unless there's other commentary or questions.
I will make a motion to go to an executive session and pursuant to Ohio Revised Code Section 121.22 G1, I hereby move the board adjourn to executive session for the purpose of considering the appointment, employment, promotion, demotion, compensation of a public employee or official.
I'll second.
Mr. Bibb?
Yes.
Mrs. Stewart?
Yes.
Mrs. Jonas?
Yes.
Mrs. Hosfeld?
Yes.
You vote, I would like to note that Mr. Bibb read specific things related from that Ohio Revised Code to our discussion. They're not all inclusive this evening. There's individualized comments that, or points of emphasis that he put there.
Great.
They voted. Yeah.
We're not voting on anything this evening either, so.
Not after this meeting.
Right, so we'll just be coming back after executive session. We're not going to be voting on anything, so. No action.
No action.
No actions to be taken tonight. All right.
I think you're gonna do it with me. I'm doing it with you? Yeah. That's okay. Yeah. Awesome.
Full house.
I will.
It's a full house today.
Yeah, it is.
I'm open.
Hey, the one guy wore his school board meeting shirt today. It's always the yellow one.